Yeah, but I'll make sure not to do, give my auction cues next time, right? Or my base running, my softball coach, right? Yeah.
Apparently there was something for Pastor Mark this morning that didn't come up on the screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure why either that or and the challenge with him is you never know how much of it is the technology and how much of it is user error. But we'll see how it goes, and we'll see how because I got a new remote last week after it didn't work. Although when I came back and tested it, the old one worked, but it was flaky and not perfectly, but it was working enough. All right, I think I'm ready if you're ready to start me, Norm. Fantastic, thank you. All right, well, good morning all again, and welcome to Bible class. We're continuing to go through Embracing Your Lutheran Identity, and we're finishing up Surviving the Dark Ages as we're looking at what happened there and how that affects our Lutheran identity. All right, so after the fall of Rome, and if you remember last week, we talked kind of about how, so the Western Empire falls, and then but the Eastern Empire keeps going. But all these different barbarians, as they conquer things, then end up getting more civilized and becoming Christian. And so after the fall of Rome, the Gauls, who were the barbarians in modern-day France, were then conquered by the Franks, which is part of why we call modern-day France, France. And the Franks especially became Christian. But then the other thing going on during this time is that Islam's founded in 610 AD, and after it's founded, it quickly expands, and we always think of it kind of in the Middle East and then expanding westward towards Europe, but we forget sometimes that it actually spread all through North Africa and then went up across the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain. From North Africa, and so finally, then the Muslims coming from the west and the east through Spain, they're defeated at the Battle of Tours in 732. And again, Tours is in modern-day France, which means Muslims have made it all the way through Spain and gotten into France by Charles the Hammer Martel. Isn't that a great name? And some historians then say this was one of the most pivotal battles in history. That if the Muslims hadn't been defeated there, then they could have kept coming eastward and things, and Europe would have been Muslim. I mean, as it is, if you remember back to your history, why is Columbus able to sail in 1492? What's happened to Spain by that point?
Oh.
So Ferdinand and Isabella got married and united Spain, and they finally drove the Muslims out of Spain. In the 1400s, they made it there in the 700s. So I know Emma's been to, our youth leader's been to Spain, and some other, but so there's still some kind of Muslim architectural influences and stuff in Spain itself, which is really kind of fascinating. But again, so they're finally able to get united. That's why they have the resources to be able to send Columbus and others to start exploring elsewhere.
Well, and wasn't it the necessity also that the trail to the Indies had been blocked off again by Muslims, right? Constantinople fell to the Muslims.
Right.
So now we've got to find a different way.
Yep.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Muslims are in Europe more than ever.
Right. Yep. They're coming back in different ways. Although again, we have there's challenges and opportunities there, as we've talked about with especially the Iranians that are becoming Christian in Germany. All right. So if the Muslims had won, nothing would have stopped the Islamization of Europe. How would your life be different if Europe was Islamic, like Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc.?
We worship on Friday.
Would anybody have even escaped and tried to go to the New World?
Right. I mean, possibly, but even, again, if they made what, it's different making it to the New World with the might of an empire behind you versus making it to the New World as a, group of refugees and things, so. All right, so when we're talking about the Dark Ages, this is just, another thing to kind of keep in mind as we go through this. All right, and then why the other reason then Charles Martel is important is because his grandson is Charlemagne, who's then crowned leader of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD by the Pope, and so that kind of, depending on who you talk to, that marks the end of the Dark Ages, because now there's a Holy Roman Emperor. Again, even if the Holy Roman Empire is, I think it was a Saturday Night Live skit, that, Holy Roman Empire is neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Discuss. I think, might have been the church lady. But yeah. So, because it's, again, based, it's anointed by the church, but it's really a political thing. It's based in France, not Rome, and it's more of a kingdom, or collection of kingdoms than necessarily an empire. So.
But it's where the Romans were.
It's where the Romans were, right? Yeah.
The Romans were all over.
The Romans were all over. I mean, they conquered, gone through France, even partway through England, and so they still had influence that way. And I mean, there's a reason all those Romance languages in Europe are all based on Latin. Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian all have kind of roots in Latin and are all related to one another. All right. So then Charlemagne, then among other things he does then is he conquers the Saxons that are in Europe, which were again another barbarian group that were around. But after their defeat, Charlemagne's trying to reunite Europe. And, the Roman Empire, one of the things that united it was religion. And so Charlemagne's trying to do that again. Again, also he's, crowned by the Pope, so he's got that authority. And so after the Saxons are defeated, Charlemagne gives them an ultimatum, become Christian or die. And so, why is get baptized or die not a good evangelism technique?
Not quite as, no, it makes it meaningful, I guess, in a
Right.
different way. I lived.
Yeah.
But not meaningful in terms of connections and
Yeah.
God and Father.
This reminds me a little bit, though, of the technique that some evangelicals use where they say, if you die tonight, do you know where you would end up?
Yeah.
And so, in a way, it's a twist kind of on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, kind of flipped again. When the Romans were in power, they were, tell the Christians, okay, come back to worship the emperor or die, and then now that's flipped, and then again see it again in some ways. And I'm trying to remember whether last week I think we talked a bit about Saint Boniface, who's the one who starts converting the Saxons by destroying Thor's oak. The comparisons we have there are to like Elijah and the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, kind of the sign of which God's bigger, because when Boniface destroys Thor's oak, all the barbarians are like, well, no, you can't touch that. Thor, lightning god's going to strike you down, and then nothing happens. And in fact, there's a wind that blows that helps the tree along to fall. So they go, oh, well, your God's more powerful. But that works again if you've got the cultural imperial power behind you. On the other hand, especially in our pluralistic society, when Paul goes to Athens, he sees all these idols and altars, but he doesn't go around smashing them. He uses them as a conversation starter. Of you've got this idol, altar to an unknown God. Well, let me tell you about him, who's bigger than all your other gods, kind of thing. And so that's that's a better method for us than that. All right. And then as we see this, though, some people can cite dramatic stories of how either they or their ancestors came to faith. Others can't. Why does it not matter how a person came to faith? Sometimes, and again, especially evangelicals will make you feel like you need to have this, giant, great conversion experience. The Puritans were really big on that as well, and some other groups, that you have to have this really big conversion experience in order for you to be saved. And if you just have some sort of ordinary thing, then it's not as effective, and maybe you're not really saved. So why does it not matter how a person came to faith, whether you have a big dramatic story of how either you or your ancestors came to faith or not?
Well, you got to always go back to the man on the cross next to Jesus. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter to Jesus. He came to faith, at the last minute, but it still counted.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the faith is what matters, not how it came about. Good. Yeah, Connie?
Well, you don't do it. The Holy Spirit.
Right. That's the other thing.
Maybe when you're very young, as an infant, or maybe as an adult. It's not something that you really have the power to do for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm reminded by the 1 Corinthians passage where Paul talks, people were saying that I was baptized by Apollos or I was baptized by Cephas, and Paul says, I watered or someone else planted, but it's God the Spirit who brings the faith to people.
Yep. God's the one who gives the growth. God's the one who's in charge there. Yep. Good. All right. Any other?
It's the action of God on us.
Yes, the action of God on us. Yes. Yep. Good. All right. And then Charlemagne's work in United Western Europe, opening schools, promoting scholarship in the arts, brought prosperity, and marked the end of the Dark Ages and beginning of the Middle Ages, which is where we get to next. So, have you noticed then, one of the themes going through the Dark Ages, though, I've noticed when the church faces hard times, it's at its best, and when things go well for the church, it's at its worst. And how should that be encouraging to Christians today? Or have you noticed that, or you see the other way around, or what's been your experience?
Some of the most heavily oppressed, victimized, even killed parts of the world, that's where when the people come out of there, they've got the strongest faith.
Yeah.
And then you come over here and we have everything we need, and whatever. We have a whatever faith. Because we have everything we need. We're not at least terribly persecuted. It's coming a little. On the politics side, you can hear it now and then. But nothing like where there's threat of death, churches burning. It's where it's strongest.
Yeah.
That's when you really know you need God.
Yeah.
You can't do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I think of, what we've heard about Cabetta's churches and how they spend hours in prayer. And it's because things aren't easy for them.
Yeah.
And they've always got some fighting somewhere along the borders or whatever. And so not only for their own nutrition and safety, they have to be in touch with God because they're so needy.
All right. So one of the things then that happens with the medieval church is we get lots of the institutions that we kind of associate with the church now. So the medieval church basically invented universities. Council of Nicaea, we've often talked about all the theological implications, but there's a bunch of political implications too, because again, it's called by the emperor and things. So one of the decrees that it issued was that churches should build a hospital, especially in every town with a cathedral. And special religious orders that pop up over the centuries ended up devoting themselves to caring for the sick. So, I mean, we talk about this too, but, what are the hospitals in Des Moines? Methodist, Lutheran, and Mercy, which is connected with a religious order, Catholic religious order that cares for the sick. Church took steps to eliminate slavery, forbidding Christians from enslaving other Christians, which essentially eliminated it in Europe until the Renaissance. Church made it a priority to care for the poor. When if you ever watch any medieval TV shows or movies or things, there's a church. There's always that, the poor box in the back that they're collecting money and giving to the poor. Robin Hood may think they're not being as effective as they should be, but they're at least doing that.
This is all credited to Charlemagne, or
This is all post-Charlotte, but post. Yeah. So, church built magnificent Romanesque churches and Gothic cathedrals filled with beautiful art from Christian artists and craftsmen. Again, the church, for good or ill, had a lot of money and power, and so you had people working. They were the ones that would commission all of these things. They'd spend. Is it Pillars of the Earth? That's the novel about like the building of cathedral, and that takes like over 100 years. I mean, it has like generations of the masons working on, and recognizing that they won't, start building something, and it won't be done in your lifetime, won't be done in your kid's lifetime. We get impatient. Sci-Town's taking so long. Yeah.
Women became educated if they joined or they were in convents.
Yeah.
Because they were spending time copying the scriptures,
Right.
among other things. And caring for the poor
Yeah.
and the sick.
Yep. Yeah. Again, the religious orders often, we're doing all of these sorts of different things. So, always reminds me. This was one of Pastor Mark's favorite stories about Kit Kitzman, former member who was an architect. When asked about his church preference, he wrote Baroque as his. Both the church preference. You were supposed to write your denomination, and he wrote the architecture style. All right. And then the medieval church inspired great literature from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales to Dante's Divine Comedy. Because remember, why is there the Canterbury Tales? Where are they going? They're all going on pilgrimage to Canterbury, to the cathedral.
Going on that trip.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to go on the hike this spring.
And then, Dante's Divine Comedy. I mean, we don't agree with the theological implications of purgatory, but the fact that purgatory, inferno, and paradise all give us a lot of those pictures that we have of what heaven and hell look like.
It doesn't sound like a comedy, though. But
I mean, it ends in paradise. So.
Yes, it is a paradise.
So yeah, I mean that's the difference between a tragedy and a comedy is tragedy ends at a funeral, and everyone dies, and comedy ends in a wedding, and so you kind of end in a wedding. Yeah, not funny. Although I think Dante had fun putting in some of the people that he puts in either purgatory or hell in the places that he does. Like, there's some of it's normal historical figures you'd expect, and then every so often there's some random Renaissance prince that ticked Dante off, and so that's why they're in one of these levels and getting tortured for eternity doing whatever it is. All right, and then compassion, a sense of human worth, the notion that peace is better than war, humility, kindness, such feelings were seen as weakness in the pre-Christian world. I've seen a few things about that a lot of the stuff that Western civilization, Western morality takes for granted comes from Christianity. The fact that we care about what's in the Epstein files is the Romans were doing all that kind of stuff long before and didn't either see anything wrong with it or so. All right, so how can the church influence culture today? You know, building how, you know, again, talk about, you know, the church has built hospitals, universities, great works of art and architecture and literature and all those sorts of things. How can the church influence culture today?
Well, maybe the biggie is helping the poor.
Yeah.
Most obvious, maybe.
Yeah.
Getting involved in the programs that, you know, whether it be food pantries or working at, I haven't done this though, like Food for First, volunteering
Yep.
to work there for a week or whatever you can.
Yeah, I mean, think in Ames. You know, if the churches were not involved, you know, where would the food pantry be? Or you know, because there's a food pantry at Bethesda. There's you know, Food at First. It's switched which first church it's at, but it's the church is where these things happen. You know, the warming place, the temporary warming shelter for when it gets really cold and the homeless shelters, emergency shelters full, is based at a church. You know, those sorts of things are good. What else? Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the churches that want to welcome everybody, which we want to do, but then you know, like one of the churches downtown, they have the pride flag,
Yep.
you know, out and things like that. You can have an influence, positive and maybe even, you know,
Yep.
negative, I don't know, in the long run. But by welcoming is certainly one of the keys.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, I think what Judy's doing with the ESL program is certainly an example of ministry. You know, we may not see her students in church
right.
on Sundays or
Yeah,
Wednesdays.
we do a lot of seed planting and seed watering, and yeah, we don't always see the growth, but we know God's at work. I know there's a couple times when students have left here and they've ended up getting connected with a Lutheran church further on, you know, wherever their next stop is, and that's where they get involved in the congregation and get baptized and things, and we get to hear about it. But there's other times we don't, you know, or the fact that there is a Korean and a Chinese church here. I mean, some of the people from those language groups end up, you know, gravitating to where they can worship in their own language. But yeah, and I know some of what it's a little less now, but there have been times that, you know, as much as the International Student Office doesn't always like churches being involved because they're trying to keep a church-state separation, that it's a lot of their volunteers, again, come from church groups. So, yeah, Alan?
One of the concerns I have though is that, does culture influence the church?
Well, yeah, that's the challenge. Yes, that it's definitely a two-way street.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, you know, one of the things we find in the medieval church is that's when you get these rise of monasteries and other groups that kind of separate themselves out from the culture. You know, that okay, we're not going to get involved. We're going to, you know, go retreat behind our monastery walls, pray, and grow our gardens and do that sort of thing. But yeah, that's always the challenge. That yeah, we can influence culture, but culture influences us too, and sometimes in ways that we don't realize. I mean, that's one of the other things we get from international students who are being connected to missionaries all over the world is, okay, what does this really mean? You know, how, you know, what does it really look like to be Lutheran, and does that involve? Does that mean we have to have, you know, casserole dishes, or any of those sorts of Scandinavian things that we associate with Lutheranism, and then, you know, they're not doing casseroles at Cabetta's churches. I mean, they will eat together doing other things, but they're not making Swedish meatballs or lefse or anything. Yeah.
I think some of our ministries within Lutheranism are good, like the radio ministry of Lutheran.
Right.
I wish we had more TV
Yep.
presentations, but I know they're very expensive to do, and that's part of it. But This Is the Life was a
Yeah.
show, family
Yeah.
show that,
Mhm.
you know, was on
Right.
TV, and that was a wonderful.
Yep.
I think even in evangelism too,
Yeah.
I mean, to just let people see the ins and
Right.
outs of being
Yeah.
a Christian.
Yeah, I know, I listened to a podcast about where Michael Ziegler, the speaker of the Lutheran Hour, talked about preaching. And he talked about how the fact is, you know, that being the Lutheran Hour speaker, when he's preparing sermons for the Lutheran Hour, he's recognizing that he never doesn't see who he's talking to. You know, he's talking to a microphone, but also that he's talking to people who are potentially and you know not Lutheran or not even Christian. And so how does that change his approach in starting? I think one of the things that they mentioned is that, and you can kind of tell when he's doing things versus when they bring a guest speaker on, is that he doesn't always start off by talking about the church day or the Bible lesson he's talking about. He goes into this extended story first to get your attention, and then kind of builds off of that into something else, instead of starting with something that people might not be as connected with. So
That's what I guess, I don't want to go overseas anywhere. I'm not even good at going across the street and talking
Right.
about it. But when I ran across Lutheran Hour Ministries, I don't know how many years ago, I thought, they are doing that.
Right.
At least I can do is send them
Yeah.
somebody.
I mean, they're doing, yeah, I mean, they've got radio shows in all sorts of different languages. I mean, they've even got, Spanish one they broadcast here in the States. Because Deaconess Guerrera, who used to be at Shepherd of the Valley, they're back in Texas now, is involved with, I think. And so, other ways to influence culture that way. Yeah.
So when I kind of reflect on this question, I guess I think of it maybe more macro.
Okay.
And that,
Yeah, no, that's fine.
you know,
Yep.
that our culture, at least in the United States, you know, we have kind of the Hollywood culture, sports culture, other types of kind of these cultural influences, some good,
Yeah.
some bad.
Right.
You know, a lot of them see bad, and like how the church can influence that. You know, I don't know, like, and I know the church and Lutheran Church and other churches do kind of try to do things together, and whether there needs to be more of effort to, I guess, combat or influence kind of where these kind of big cultural norms come
Right.
through in our society.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure kind of what's the best way to do that.
Right, oh, yeah, definitely.
Or whether it's better just, we're a memorial and we
Yeah.
have kind of the influence
Right.
that we can have here, whether it's with the university, international students, other things, and that's where you kind of concentrate it more kind of on the ground at a
Yeah.
more micro level.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for, I mean, that the church working at all those different levels, both on the individual level and kind of, on that macro level of things. You know, and we're seeing this some with the pro-life movement of how do we, are we just influencing laws or are we trying to influence hearts too? And if we do, how do we do that? And how does that work? And so, and things like free ultrasounds or models of babies and things to kind of influence how people see that. But then, trying to get the culture to move in a wholly pro-life direction certainly isn't always easy and things. Yeah, Connie?
Well, I think the youth gathering and those smaller gatherings that you have at Thanksgiving time, I think for middle school students, and are good because kids need to see that there are other believers
Yep.
in their peer group, because they may not find
Yep.
them in school.
Right. Yeah, so recognize ways to kind of raise that up, make sure that help people realize they're not alone. So.
You were involved a little bit in the junior youth gathering for Iowa West and the senior.
Senior youth gathering and the junior high camp. up at Okoboji every year. So that's
300 in each of those this last fall.
yeah. The district youth gatherings seem to be
It does do those kids,
Yep.
well, in my brain,
Right.
a lot of good
yep.
to see like-minded.
Mhm.
There are others out there.
Yeah.
Well, and they have opportunities to be involved in projects, and if you go a little early,
Yep.
there's usually a project that has to do with cleaning up the park or.
Yeah. The National Youth Gatherings always have a service component. The district ones have gotten better at it. The challenge is always kind of more logistical, trying to how to get that to work out. But yeah, different ways to do that too. Yeah, Jeanette and then Norm.
We don't seem to utilize it very much, but the Lutheran Layman's League, I just got their paper and I was reading it yesterday, and my goodness, the amount of pamphlets and such that they have are excellent.
Right.
It would seem nice to have, I don't know, some of those to maybe hand out sometime. We have care notes in the office, but I mean, they look like they're.
You're talking Gary's language. He's getting ready to pounce on you afterwards. So, and Mark too. So,
But really,
yeah. No, I mean, and that is something that we, don't always take. You
It's
take
also something that's
some
very-
recognizing the resources we do have.
International.
Yeah.
so,
Yep. Yeah, Norm.
The former pastor here, Art Simmons, who was here about 50 years ago, was on the staff of Lutheran Hour Ministries for a time. And eventually he was on that staff, and I believe he did a lot of work in Europe.
Okay. Huh. I'm not sure I knew that about former Pastor Art Simmons being involved in Lutheran Hours. So, all right. Good discussion. We'll keep going. You can keep thinking about that too. This is one of those things, Alan, that you were talking about earlier. Where I keep asking these questions with no answers, and you hope I have a key. I don't always. That's all right. All right. So, we get to the Middle Ages. One of the things that influences it is that it's kind of set up in what we call the feudal system, and where everyone's sorted into 3 estates. And Luther talks about this when he talks about vocation. There's those who fight and rule, so the leaders and the knights and nobility, that sort of thing. Those who work, the serfs, peasants sort of people, and those who pray, priests and then monks and nuns as well. Our society is different without hierarchies or strict class distinctions, yet we still have pecking orders and hierarchies based on popularity or other things. So why do we keep doing that? Why don't we just have everything egalitarian and everyone equal, but instead like to put things in hierarchies?
We're a selfish people.
We're selfish people, right? Yep.
Well, a lot of these distinctions are based on income.
Okay, yeah, distinctions based on income,
And
definitely.
It's become, the driver of so much right now,
Yeah.
politics.
And
So.
those on the TV, most, that also make a great deal of money are athletes.
Yep.
So there's definitely a pecking order to some degree of
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can't-
some kind of a respect.
Yep. Okay, Alan, you can go
I
ahead.
can't believe how much influencers
Yeah.
dominate our society.
Oh, right, yeah. If I make YouTube videos that are popular enough, I could be
If I get 3
millionaire,
million
right,
hits,
yes.
why I'm
right. Well, when you do, let me know, and make sure to tie it. But
You can't even watch, a movie now that you
Yeah.
can stream without having ads
yeah,
interrupting it. And
everything is about chasing the almighty dollar. Yeah.
I think sometimes people have different abilities.
Mhm.
Some people are really good at organizing, and some people are better at being assigned tasks.
Yep. Yeah, different abilities, different inclinations, definitely. Which again, I mean, we in the church we talk about the body and all the we need all these different parts working together, and society needs that too, but we don't always value that equally. All right. During the Middle Ages, the church exercised great authority in the secular realm. Again, the church was the institution that made it through the fall of Rome largely unscathed, and so they gained some power that way. The result was to secularize the church, making it preoccupied with politics and wealth. So how can churches today become secularized, that is, lose their spiritual focus and concentrate instead on worldly concerns? Yeah, Jeanette?
Well, if we look only at, I was going to say this, the spiritual focus
Mhm.
is what we're
Yeah.
supposed to do. That's the calling.
Yep.
And then it can be shown through the things that you do in the community or among
Yeah.
yourselves. But worship is where we get our strength from.
Mhm.
And so we should concentrate on that. And then as
Yeah.
a result of that,
Right, I mean, that's
happen.
like anything, we always, need to keep in balance, that we focus on coming together for worship, but we don't want to be so heavenly minded we're no earthly good, but we also don't want to be so earthly minded we're no heavenly good. Eli, yeah.
I think one of the things is the sense of being blessed by God.
Okay.
And very often churches point out your riches,
Mhm.
your position or whatever. God has blessed you with that. And, that's really,
Okay, yeah, when the church focuses in on, okay, if you're doing well, God's blessing you. If you're not, then
right.
you haven't, so you need to pray harder or tithe more or whatever. Yeah,
God must really like
Yeah.
you because he's given you all of these
Right.
things.
yeah.
That's the prosperity gospel is
Yep.
the point.
Yeah.
But a lot of churches become secularized by buying into the church growth and the church planting.
Mhm.
And the church planting becomes the focus of the service.
Right.
Right, yeah,
And it becomes a self-help. You need the church.
Right.
yeah. How can we get the most people in here? Because again, in America, bigger is better, and the two easiest things to measure are how many people are coming and how much money is coming in. And real growth happens often in other ways that are a lot harder to measure. And so, if we end up focusing on what do we do to bring more people in, overlooking, to the extent of losing your mission, or what do we do to get more money coming in, to make sure that the people with more money are coming in here, and that. Yeah, that could.
When Connie was saying about feeling blessed, they keep coming back because they have that feeling, but really their faith is probably not quite as deep or
Yep.
as someone who's really connected to.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of church plants in the inner city. Or if they are, there might be a storefront church, but, that's not, they may have 13 members
Yeah.
that are there
Yeah.
on a regular basis, but that's not where a lot of the churches are being planted.
Right. Yeah, or again, it's a lot easier to plant a church that's going to be self-sufficient very quickly if you plant like in a growing suburb. It's a lot harder if you're planting a church in inner city or rural area.
Just like a grocery store.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
There's groups that find out, where are the grocery stores opening up, where are the Walmarts opening up, what are their growth plans, what are they seeing, and that's where we, need to build churches and things too. Which, again, there's things for new churches that attract different people, but when again the numbers become more important than the mission, that's where there's an issue. Yeah, Jeanette.
I was just going to say, we need the secularized portion because that's what maybe draws people in. The
Okay.
welcoming of them, or an activity that you have.
Well, and again, the difference is where is the activity serving the mission, or is the activity becoming the mission?
Right.
I think is the issue where we can focus in more on, making sure that we're bringing all the kids into the school or the activities or whatever. And so we'll just go big all out on those things, and with shifting on other issues. So, and the other thing too is we don't want to be either a political party at prayer. I think depending on who you talk to, the mainline churches were sometimes considered the Democratic Party at prayer, and the conservative churches were considered the Republican Party at prayer. And when the political issues become more important than the Christian issues, that happens too, and has challenges. So, but then during the Middle Ages, and we'll finish up here. We might start back here again next week. During the Middle Ages, the Word of God played a smaller and more marginal role in the life of the Christian and the church. We've talked about this again. People can't read. Even if they could read, they might be able to read their native language, not Latin. That's what the church is doing everything in, the Western church anyway. And so imagine if your church had no access to the Bible, what would be different, what would replace the role of the Bible, and what would that mean to your faith? So, in other words, the church could be, potentially based on the Bible, but none of you can read it. I've read it. I'd tell you what it says, and you trust me on it. Yeah.
That's one of the roles that the church artwork provides.
Yeah, right. And so again, that's part of with the architecture and the artwork. Right. We see around here what does the artwork depict? If you can't read, you can maybe figure out some of these parables. Some of them you can't. I know there's a couple I always have to still look at and go, what parable is this depicting? But that or the artwork up front. You should be able to tell the life story of Jesus by working your way up the middle window.
When I was in Sunday school, this is 100 years ago, please. The Sunday school lessons used to have famous paintings on the front, and of course now with having to pay all the licensing fees, that would be impossible.
Right.
But every once in a while, I'll be in a museum and I'll say, I think I've seen that before, and I'm sure it was in the front of the Sunday school lesson.
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying. One of the new editions of the Catechism, I forget. I'm not totally sure which one has brought back the wood carvings that Durr did for them that depicts different Bible stories that go with like each commandment or each part of the creed or things. So again, if we're not in a literate society, then we communicate visually. So we have artwork. So they had artwork. They had statues. The music in some ways, communicated some of that too. But when you have to do things like, ring a bell during communion so you know something's important happening because you don't understand hocus pocus. No, haec est corpus est, this is my body, is Latin. So.
And Paul went up to visit a couple times in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Well, at least you wouldn't have dust on the Bible.
Right.
You wouldn't have.
Yeah, if you don't have a Bible at home, you can't get dust on it. Right. Yeah, we don't always have. Yeah, we're almost too inundated. So although there is talk now that we're almost becoming post-literate, and and I think I talked about this some last week too, with the idea of the Bible translators like the Grolkis. They don't have to create a written language for these language groups to do the Bible. They can get speakers and record them and have it on an app or send out MP3 players or something, and then so you don't need to go make the extra literary loop work there for good or ill. Yeah, Connie, last thing.
Another thing too, and I know a lot of the reformers threw everything out, but
right.
There's a sense of transcendence when you go into some of these cathedrals and you know you're in a holy place.
Right.
And it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've been watching Olympic coverage and seen the cathedral in Milan, or pictures of that sometimes, or or especially even the drone picture where they show people on the roof, and you're like, that's high. Yeah. That again, these. Yeah, as we'll see as we go through looking at the medieval period, we hit a bunch of, as Lutherans and reformers, we know we know how these things end up getting abused later, but they all start, for good reasons. So, all right, we'll stop here, and we'll keep going with this topic next week. So thank you all for coming.
Thank